It means the Ministry's interfering at Hogwarts.
You're not going mad. You're just as sane as I am.
I must not tell lies.
You seem to be laboring under the delusion that I'm going to, what was the phrase? Come quietly.
Hey everyone, welcome to Hogwarts, a podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Hogwarts, a podcast. We are covering Chapter 32, Out of the Fire. We have a very special guest with us because she's back. It's been a long time, Julie.
I'm back, everybody.
It's been a very, very long time.
It's been such a long time. I'm so glad to be back.
You last recorded, I think it was back in August.
Yeah, sometime in the summer.
Which was maybe it was within the first 10 chapters of the book was the last time we had you on. And now we're at chapter 32.
I know.
So it's kind of crazy to think about.
I'm back just in time, too.
Oh, she has thoughts, people. Get ready.
Yeah, I have lots of thoughts.
Before we get to this chapter, though, I do have a couple of shout-outs. Some lovely people left some great comments, so I want to take some time to acknowledge them. We got Ashley, who left a comment on our Chamber of Secrets Chapter 1, The Worst Birthday episode. And she goes, I love this podcast. I really appreciate that you have both a spoiler and non-spoiler section. I love that you have a new guest on every week, and how much fun you guys always have. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ashley. Appreciate the comment. Stella, who's been fairly active recently on our comments, left one on Order of the Phoenix, Chapter 29, Career Advice. So a really recent chapter. And she goes, Happy Holidays. Happy holidays to you. That happened. The holidays did happen. We've been very busy. But anyway, she goes on to say, I agree with Dan on many levels.
What?
I know. Sometimes I have
Look at that,
some points.
Dan. That is your holiday gift, is someone who's agreeing with you.
Yeah, well, the irony here is you also agree with me.
Oh, no!
Because the point that I'm thinking she's agreeing with me on is how much flack I gave Harry for his decision.
The one thing I agree with you on, Dan,
I know.
every time.
I know. I gave him a lot of flack for going into Umbridge's office just to find out that his dad is a jerk or not. Weirdly enough, ties into something that happens in this chapter, so we'll get back to that. And our next comment, I'm going to butcher this name, so I apologize. First name, Ima? De Leon, I'm going to guess. Order of the Phoenix, Chapter 28, Snape's Worst Memory. This memory is where I learned how emotionally complex Snape is as a character, and when he became my favorite. The amount of guilt from calling Lily a mudblood is what made him turn to Voldy. I actually agree. Snape's Worst Memory is a really cool chapter to kind of dive into characters' backgrounds because we learn some not so nice things about James and your favorite character, Sirius. Yes. And we learned that Snape, there's reasons for Snape is who he is today. And
yes.
Just like everyone. Childhood does matter in people's development.
And I feel like, too, the thing that's very interesting with Snape is up until this point, he's very much been portrayed as, like, the scapegoat for everything that can, like, go bad. He's been the scapegoat for our trio for the longest time, and I feel
Ever since Sorcerer's Stone, because he was supposed to be the one trying to go after the Sorcerer's Stone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I feel like now we're starting to get more into the reasons behind some of the disdain that he has for our trio and actually saying that it's not just some type of like stupid petty drama. I mean, it's still kind of stupid and petty, but like I appreciate
there's
that
trauma
now,
in there that has created this. It's not coming out of nowhere.
Yes, but I mean, putting that trauma onto a child that's not connected to it, completely different story. But
correct.
I appreciate that now we're starting to get into the deeper layers.
I think it's really interesting how this is delving into a lot of different characters' backgrounds at this point. So it's been fun. Thank you for the comments. I really appreciate them, especially the more recent episodes, Career Advice and Snape's Worst Memory. That's pretty cool that people are jumping on that comment bandwagon as we put out the episodes. So that's really cool to see. If you want to leave a comment, just listen to our episode on Spotify. There's polls on Spotify. There's the comment option you can leave. There's a review that you can leave. All that helps us grow the podcast. You can also, find us on Twitter and Instagram. Jen has recently taken up our Instagram, so that's a little bit more active than it has been. So thank you to Jen for that. But anyway, let's jump into the actual chapter, Out of the Fire, chapter 32. There's a lot that happens, and Julie's got opinions on all of it. Really one main thing, but we'll get there. So in the chapter, we essentially get some fallout from Harry fainting in his History of Magic exam. We get some interaction between Harry, Ron, and Hermione. That's
all I'll say for right now.
That's what Julie has to really hammer in. They come up with this plan to once again invade Umbridge's office, and you know how I felt about it last time. How will I feel about it this time? We'll find out. And then, shockingly, Umbridge catches him this time. So we get all of the fallout from that. So let's start back up with Harry faints in the middle of an exam in a crowded Great Hall. And this first of all, there's the fallout of what he actually passed out from and the dream sequence that he saw. And then he wakes up, everybody's staring at him. The professor's over the top of him being like, are you okay? I know the exhaustion from exams can drain anybody.
Listen, I've taken a lot of exams and I don't think I've ever passed out from they haven't been wizarding exams, but
that's true. This is a History of Magic exam, so I don't believe it's taking that much out of you other than boring you, which has been a problem with this class from the get-go.
Fair enough.
His main focus is, I need to help Sirius. I need to figure out a way to help Sirius. So he runs to the hospital wing looking, which is a great cover because he needs to go to the hospital wing.
He just passed out anyway.
And he runs and he's looking for McGonagall, but he's informed that she's actually been transferred to St. Mungo's.
Can we just take a quick second? Everyone, hang on to your seats because I'm actually going to compliment Harry. I think potentially for the first time ever. Because you know what? This time, he actually went to get help. Harry actually went, hold on, something bad's happening. Let me find the grown-up.
Yep.
And he actually tried. So you know what? Way to go, Harry, for not doing something stupid from the get-go.
Yeah, he actually took the proper steps.
Yes.
And he goes to a person, he does think very quickly here, because he's like, I don't have Dumbledore. Mm-hmm. I don't have Hagrid.
Yeah.
McGonagall's the only one I have left. That at least he's somewhat close with.
Yeah, well, and that who's not gonna look at him like he has 3 heads and be like, what are you talking about?
McGonagall's done a very good job in this book of taking him seriously.
Yes.
So, it's a sign of growth in Harry that he's like, hey, I need to go find McGonagall. Even though McGonagall, even if she was in the hospital wing and not at St. Mungo's, is in no condition.
What is she going to do? I mean, listen, he looked for help. That wasn't just his fellow teenage friends. So way to go, Harry. But also, bro, what you doing?
So what is his next option? He's got to find his next best hope, which is Ron and Hermione. And this is where we get into some issues. So obviously he finds them. He's like, hey, we got to go to the Ministry of Magic. We got to save Sirius. And they're appropriately like, I'm sorry, what? What are you talking about?
Well, I also love that Harry's thought process of finding Ron and Hermione was McGonagall's not here. What am I going to do? Who am I going to talk to? I don't even know. There's no one here. Oh, right. My 2 best friends who helped me through every single major life challenge, who helped figure it all out, who helped me save the day, who are always my support system, who I always yell at. What about them? Well, I guess they'll do because no one else is around.
We're about to be somewhat harsh on Harry here. And
somewhat is kind, Dan.
I will try to be Harry's voice. So essentially, he's telling him everything. And he wants them to go to the ministry. So he's trying to sell them on this. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to break down the 3 angles that we have here between the 3 of them. Harry is obviously in a very panicked, stressed, sleep-deprived, exhausted state.
That his only family member, we're going to call Sirius family.
Sure.
His only family member is in danger and at risk of being lost.
Right. I'm not 100% going to be on the let's throw Harry in a ditch for all of his, I
agree.
There's some reasons why he's acting the way he is. Hermione is being Hermione in the best way possible of just being like, okay, let's actually think about this. Let's be smart about what we're about to do. And Ron, you might think, well, Ron's just helping Harry because they are best friends. Well, no. Ron is looking at this through his lens of what the facts are, because he's going, I know it's a dream, quote unquote, but he was right about my dad. Mm-hmm. And if he's right about my dad, he could very well be. Why wouldn't he be right about this?
Well, which is why I think the boys are looking very much in the present facts, and Hermione is looking at what
whole
could
picture.
be coming down the line.
Yeah.
She is looking at okay, there is potential that it's just a dream. There is potential that this whole thing is a trap.
I mean, Hermione literally lays out Voldy's potential plan here.
Yes.
Like point for point. I guess what we're saying is it's a complex situation that the three of them are in.
Yes.
Because I think they all do have some valid points here. I just happen to lean towards Hermione because I think she's making the most reasoned argument against trying to go. And eventually she convinces Harry to be at least on the more cautious side and be like, hey, let's take a couple of steps here before we just jump in. Like,
shouldn't your thought process be like, figure out a way to communicate with Dumbledore? You can't tell me that there is not a single way to communicate with him. And like, I get it. It's a stressful situation. The stakes are very high. But Harry, stop yelling at the people who are trying to help you. I get it. It's stressful and it's a potentially life or death situation. But we saw it at the beginning of this book and we're seeing it now that Harry continuously will lash out at Ron and Hermione when they're trying to be supportive and trying to help.
Their little conversation, let's say.
This is like my favorite part of the whole chapter because I think it's so funny.
Is so loud that it actually permeates the walls and the door of the classroom that they got into. And Ginny and Luna enter, and Harry immediately snaps at Ginny. And Ginny's just like, excuse you, who do you think you're talking to?
My favorite part, though, is that when Ginny and Luna enter, Ginny says that it recognized Harry's voice. And, like, don't get me wrong, like, you know your friend's voice, and you know your friend's voice whether they're, like, whispering, they're loud, or they're, like, shouting. But I just think it's so funny that it's, like, he's in this room shouting.
Hark, do I hear like, the dulcet tones of Harry screaming throughout the halls?
And they're like, we recognized Harry's voice.
And Luna's just, like, Ginny gets fiery in her own right out the gate, and Luna's just like, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm present. This is so.
Also, can we just, like, throw out there that Hermione had a missed career opportunity as a crisis negotiator? Because, like, I feel like she would be, like, fantastic. Like,
yeah, that should have been some of her career advice.
Yes.
Like, magical hostage situations or something like that.
Or,
I mean,
like,
that's essentially
bank robbery.
what this is.
Like, I think she'd be fantastic at it.
Like, everybody calm down.
Yeah.
Everybody
Let's do
chill.
this plan. Let's think through.
I guess the five of them now come up with this plan that they are going to invade Umbridge's office again and use the flu network. So the plan is Ginny and Luna essentially act as a barricade of sorts in the hallway. Hermione's going to go into the room with Harry so he's not alone and someone's in there just in case. And Ron is going to kick the whole thing off by telling Umbridge that there's a disturbance somewhere else in the castle. Peeves destroying the Transfiguration department. And I love how Harry's like, I knew Hermione was in when she didn't object to the destruction of the Transfiguration. That's nice.
Sign of solidarity and loyalty.
Yes.
Because apparently one of your closest friends is not loyal to you. One of your friends that has literally faced death with you multiple times. Sorry, I'm still salty about how Harry treated Ron and Hermione earlier. And how he still treats them now. It's fine.
Yes, we had that whole debate back in chapter 4.
Yep, still salty about it.
You're still salty about it. I will tell you that 77% of our listeners still say the Arthur-Percy argument was worse.
I think it's because we're all looking at the fallout perspective of, well, I think everyone who's in the 77% is looking at the fallout from it. Of people saying, like, the things that they know will dig the daggers and then it causes the division in the family. Whereas, like, for me, I think that the friend fight is worse because it's like, you know that they're going to stand there and take it. And you will keep going and screaming at them just to essentially, like, vent, but you're not venting. You're venting while also targeting them. So you're putting all of your anger from everything else into your friends and just punching them over and over and over and over.
I think Ron and Hermione kind of knew they deserved a little blowback, which is why I think they kind of took a more passive result of it. Whereas here, I don't think they... Like, Hermione knows, no, I have every right to step up to you right now. I'm going to do it. So I think that's the difference in those two situations, there and here, I think is why Hermione's maybe a little stronger in this particular scene.
Well, I mean, think about it. Earlier in the book, like, Hermione was literally crying because of Harry, like, going at her. And, like, I would have to imagine that at this point, she's like, no, we are done with this. I am done. Let's, like, all take a second. As I tell my toddler, let's take a deep breath.
This isn't about missed mail over the summer. This is about we're going to lead a coup in the ministry, or something like, not a coup, but we're going to, like, lead an assault on the ministry.
Special ops.
Yeah. So anyway, the plan is Harry does remember to bring his invisibility cloak, which you and I have been on. Like, if you're going to do this, at least remember to have the appropriate things. He also remembers the knife that Sirius got him to open locks. Mm-hmm. That's interesting, how you remember the knife, but not the package that Sirius gave you to specifically communicate with him if you needed to.
Well, and I don't know if we should knock Harry for that, or if we should be knocking J.K. Rowling.
Presumably, to get to the knife and the invisibility cloak, which we haven't heard of either of them for a little while, especially the cloak. He hasn't used the cloak in a minute. Presumably, he had to, rummage around his trunk for these things.
Yeah.
And I'm presuming he nudged or heard a clunk or something as the package fell or ruffled around.
Fair.
But I'm just, whatever.
You remember the cloak, Dan. That's all we can really expect.
That's fair. Side note. Here's the thing about the Flu Network that I have questions about. Because Umbridge mentions in a previous chapter how they're obviously watching all of the fires in the castle except for hers. So if you're watching a Flu Network, they're going to Grimmauld Place, which is a secret location.
Which I would assume would also mean that it's hidden.
Even from people monitoring the Flu Network.
I would think so, because you could walk past Grimmauld Place and not see it.
Yeah.
So what's the difference?
It's just odd to me that, like, Flu Network is trackable or traceable. But somehow they can't figure out the location. They know one location, but apparently not the other.
Well, maybe it's not necessarily that they know both ends of it, but that they know a fire was used in the Flu Network. Like, they would know, like, Tuesday at 8:57 a.m., the Gryffindor Common Room fire was used in the Flu Network. So then you could, connect the dots.
So it's only the one.
Maybe.
Like, you can't be like, okay, the Gryffindor fire was used to participate in a Flu Network conversation, but we don't know with whom.
Well, I would think that they would know, like, both ends of it, but not necessarily, like, connected.
It's just an odd
That's
thing.
the way that, like, I see it, because otherwise you're getting into, like, essentially, like, wiretapping
Kinda.
calls.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's essentially what this is.
My guess would be that they know when the fire is used in the Flu Network, but not necessarily where. Now, if someone's sitting there and recording all of these, they can look through and go, okay, the Flu Network was used from 8:26 to 8:29. Let's see what other, like, fire in the Flu Network was used for that amount of time.
I will give you that the Grimmauld Place has an immense amount of protective enchantments on it, which could work, or it could block whatever tracking system the Ministry might have. Mm-hmm. But if you're specifically maybe tapping it, that'd be hard, because It's not like the Ministry, especially at this point in their history, cares about privacy. Like, they will try to break whatever they have to break to find... Because clearly something's going on that they don't approve of. But I don't know. That was just my 2 cents question of like, wait a minute, why can't they track Grimmauld Place as the place the Food Network's being used? But anyway. So in the whole Food Network usage, we get only Creature. And Creature's like, oh no, he's gone. Mm-hmm. And Harry picks up on some, I'm going to call them some flags. Some little, maybe not glaring red flags, but they're yellow bordering on orange caution flags of like, oh, he seems happy.
Yeah. Some flags that I have a lot to say about in the spoilers section.
Fair enough. But there's some things that he's picking up on about Creature that's a little concerning.
Yes. But
he like notices them and then continues to like walk right on by.
I think we see this a lot with Harry is that once Harry has decided what he's doing, that's what Harry's doing. Like, he is very, like, point A, point B. If someone is trying to put something in the middle there, it does not matter because we are still getting to point B. Mm-hmm. I want to get into the Chamber of Secrets. We will find the Chamber of Secrets. If Harry wants to do it, he's doing it no matter who's up against him.
So, with Creature being a little mischievous on the other end of this fire.
Dodgy.
A little dodgy, but essentially giving Harry what he confirms what Harry believes is happening. Mm-hmm. And then he gets a very sharp pain in his head as it gets yanked out of the fire by Umbridge. And he looks around and everybody's captured, including Neville, who got caught up in the whole thing because he was trying to help Ginny from being captured.
I would also like to point out that I don't remember this from the multiple times that I've read the book before rereading it for today, that all 4 of them had been gagged. So they weren't just captured, like, and brought to Umbridge's office. They were gagged. Like,
well,
what?
Julie, screaming children are annoying. So...
Fair, but, like... I just can't get over, like, the image of, like, a bunch of essentially high schoolers, like, gagging the other ones and, like, bringing them in, like,
they're all physically holding them, too.
Yeah.
Which I feel is a little odd, considering they can use magic.
Yeah.
So why can't you just, like, magically...
There's no magic to, like...
bind someone in place?
Bind them or to... keep them from talking. Instead, like, it's pirate times and we're gagging our prisoners.
Apparently. Yeah, that's weird. Harry does do some very quick thinking and some very quick lying to Umbridge, but unfortunately she is not buying any of it.
Well, it was kind of bad lying, too. Like, it wasn't even...
It's fair. I mean, you just get your head yanked out. You're already in a panicked, emotionally distraught place, and now you're being questioned, and any answer that you give could give you up. I feel like he did a pretty good job of being...
Of the broom where he knows where it is. I mean, okay, so here's my question for you, Dan. I have a question for you this week.
Uh-oh.
What other lies could Harry have used to get out? Not to get out of it, because it's Umbridge, so he never would have gotten out of the situation. But what would have been a better lie that would have at least been slightly believable?
Well, I think that's a plausible lie to use because he does love Quidditch, and Umbridge, I don't think, gives Harry much credit. So if it was someone that gave Harry more, like if he's trying to spin a lie on McGonagall, like obviously this would be a really subpar lie. I get that. But Umbridge doesn't really think much of Harry.
But Umbridge, since she doesn't think much of Harry, I feel like she also seems to think that Harry is very, like, conniving and is... which, I mean, to be fair, he is a little, like, conniving in regards to Umbridge, in a good way. I don't think that Umbridge would go, oh, yeah, he's probably trying to get his broom. Like, if I heard that, I'd be like, okay, what? Bro, you know that it is locked in the dungeon, and what are you doing in the Flu Network to find your broom?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess the only other lies that I could think, he could take credit for the Niffler, and the Food Network could be the way he's getting Nifflers into the room. Like, he could throw that lie out there.
Yeah. Or, like, I was even thinking it could have been that he wanted to, like, talk to McGonagall, so he was trying to see if there's a fire at St. Mungo's. I don't know.
Could also be plausible.
I don't know how he would cover that to make it not look like he was trying to do something on, like, Dumbledore's behalf, but, like, I just feel like of all of the lies that he could have told, he picked, like, the most obvious lie.
I'm going to be 100% truthful. If I was under the gun and that much, like, stress and exhaustion, I don't know that I could have come up with better. Like,
okay, fair.
Like, off the top of my head, I honestly don't know that I could come up with better. Anyway, so we get, as Umbridge is pestering Harry with questions and trying to get him, the Slytherins are laughing about, you know, the Weasleys potentially all being expelled and there not being another Weasley here. I did think that them laughing at McGonagall being injured so terribly was a little beneath them, and I get they're Slytherins, but it's like, I get laughing at the Weasleys being all expelled, haha, that's funny, that's whatever. McGonagall very easily could have been killed, and I get that there's a Gryffindor-Slytherin rivalry, but like, a person almost died. It's not like McGonagall, I fully, I have my issues with McGonagall, but I don't think McGonagall was ever like Snape, where she favored Gryffindors over Slytherins.
No,
I feel like she was fairly down the middle.
She disciplines her house just as much as she would Slytherin. Right. I think McGonagall is very, like, fair on that aspect.
I feel like she's well respected.
Yeah, but when you look at who these Slytherins are,
it's the worst of the Slytherins.
Like, you're talking about the people.
It's not the Jen Slytherins.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
Yeah.
And, like, you're talking about the people whose parents at home are probably bad-mouthing her.
That's fair.
Who are saying that, you know, she doesn't know what she's talking about, that she's not a talented witch. Like, you're talking about the crew of Slytherins that anyone who isn't Slytherin is bad and wrong and isn't that great.
Yeah, no, you make a good point with, you got to look at who specifically the Slytherins are.
Yeah.
That's very fair. I guess the issue that I'm running into both ways, Gryffindors and Slytherins, is the rivalry between the houses is becoming more important than actual real people's lives, because Ron does it too. Yeah. Ron's like, oh, Montague will get permanently injured? Who cares? He took points away from Gryffindor. I'm like, no. There's a difference between the severity of things happening here.
But again, that goes back to the fact that they're all teenagers.
Yeah.
And, I mean...
they don't get it.
Yeah, and, like, okay, you're a big sports person. I'm clearly not. But, like, you know, think about, like, in sports. Like, if your rival team, if the quarterback of the rival football team gets injured, you're not sitting there going, oh, that's so sad for him. You're like, easy victory for us. I'm not wrong.
That's true, although getting hurt and missing a couple plays is one thing. Being like, his career is over. I'm not like, yeah, his career is over.
But there's a part of you.
There's a part of me that's like, oh, we're probably going to win this game now. But I'm like, I'm also hoping, oh, I hope he's okay. Just, okay. You know, there's that little guilty part of you that's always like, I'm happy for this, but I don't want it to be like a real bad.
Think about it. We're talking about that, and we're in our 30s where...
That's fair.
You know, you're talking about a bunch of teenagers who don't necessarily understand any... I mean, they understand the severity, but I don't think it clicks as well.
Mm-hmm. So, Harry finally remembers that Severus Snape is a member of the Order of the Phoenix. Umbridge asks for Snape's presence because she wants him to bring her more Veritaserum, which Snape replies with, I gave you the last of it when you tried to interrogate him the first time. Please tell me you didn't use it all. I told you 3 drops was enough.
I love this part because I am not a huge Snape fan, but his snark, I am here for it. And I love it. Like, when I was reading this, I was like, I love, like, the level of wow, I'm not going to tell you you're a moron, but you're a moron.
Yeah. So this is why I think one of the reasons I love this book so much. Because Snape is such a villain through the first 4 books. Mm-hmm. And you are supposed to hate him. Mm-hmm. Especially if you're reading this solely through Harry's eyes. You're supposed to hate Severus Snape. And you might have gained a little bit of... So in this book, you gain a little bit of sympathy for him, hopefully, in Snape's worst memory.
Yes.
But I think there are some people who, even the most staunch haters of Snape, find themselves being like, "Ooh, yeah, Snape got one over on Umbridge." Like they're almost cheering for Snape.
Yeah. Well, and
very specific circumstance.
Yeah,
but...
I don't think I would necessarily say that like I'm cheering for Snape, but the one thing that I do really like about this book in particular is you see a lot more sides of him, and it starts the question of, wait a minute, so what side was he truly on? Because we know that he had the association with the Death Eaters, we know that Dumbledore really trusts him, and it was very easy prior to this book to go, I mean, he's pulling one over on Dumbledore, right? And you start getting into Order of the Phoenix, and I feel like through this whole book, there's so many times where you keep bouncing back and forth just on Order of the Phoenix, where you're like,
where does his loyalties truly lie?
Where you're trying to figure out where his loyalties lie, and then like you see him make these like snide, snarky comments at Umbridge, where like, to me, Snape kind of, this is like almost like an opportunity for Snape to kind of like get the, not that Snape is power hungry, but for Snape to get like the power that he wants.
He knows he's right.
Yeah.
And he knows she's not particularly knowledgeable about his field of expertise.
Which also, I do have a question about that, because you would think, because Snape says that in order to brew more, it would take, what was it, like a
full moon cycle.
So
yeah.
It would take a month. Wouldn't you think that as a ministry official, that you would have some knowledge of how long a controlled substance would take to make?
I would also think, okay, so now we're getting into what exactly are the laws surrounding Veritaserum? Like, can it be used on the whim and will of any, like, buddy? Or...
Okay, to be fair, with what happens in, like, the next page and a half, I don't think Umbridge is really concerned about it.
Okay. Well, that's 100% true. But, like, I'm wondering if there are certain circumstances where it's allowed and certain circumstances where it's like, no, you have to have a certain amount of evidence before you can, like, proceed to that level of interrogation.
I can't imagine that it would be like, hey, you have questions? Get yourself some answers. Snape brings up the point of the, like, oh, and I can't use it, but, you know, my hand might slip over your pumpkin juice. And so I think there has to be some level of, like, control and regulation, and I don't know if it's like the ingredients or if it's you have to like state that you're making some and storing it. Like, it would make sense that a potions master would have some. Mm-hmm. Or that there would even be some in Hogwarts, when you consider like if there's a security risk happening at Hogwarts, like there's a lot at stake.
Also, if you're Umbridge and you knew this was probably going to be part of your new regime, you'd think you'd ask Snape for, like, a little bit of an actual store of this. But to Snape's point, he was like, I only told you to use 3 drops. That's on you.
Yeah, well,
like,
and, I mean, I think even if Umbridge, like, knew she was going to use it, like, she's, I don't want to say dumb enough, because that's a little harsh and mean, but she's also in a state herself right now. Yes, so it's like she's in her own, like, heightened state. And so I don't think that there was the foresight of, let's make sure that I have a bunch of this potion. I think it was well, that was a lie, so we're going to get to the truth as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. Because she's trying to lay down the law so quickly that why would you sit there and have a conversation when you can just get your answer?
Yep. Well, Snape doesn't do enough for her. So she immediately puts him on probation for not helping enough.
Literally, it's like 3 paragraphs in this book that I'm literally like dying laughing at because of the level of snark coming from 2 adults.
And I can imagine Snape here vividly in my mind just going like, huh. Okay.
Like I just
whatever,
like
lady.
see him like raising a single eyebrow and like, all right, and just like leaves. Like, cool.
There is, and you, Julie, have to admit, this is some pretty quick thinking on Harry's part. As Snape is walking out the door, saying he's got Padfoot at the place where it's hidden. And I think it's really good on Harry here to come up with a way to get information to Snape that no one else in the room should get.
Yeah.
That, and Harry goes, oh, I hope he understands it. Like,
well, I think you're also in the situation of who cares if they understand it at this point? As long as you're not saying, like, they have Sirius Black in the Department of Mysteries, in the Ministry of Magic, where the weapon is hidden. Please go get him. Like,
what would you think Umbridge would do if they're like, they have Sirius Black in the Department of Mysteries? Like, what would Umbridge do? That's almost a fascinating what if in its own right.
Like, I wish that, like, the answer to it is that, like, she would be like, this kid is delusional, like, lock him in the dungeon or something.
The more I think about it, that's not a bad strategy.
Yeah, you could have done that.
You could literally just say, hey, I was checking on the Department of Mysteries. I think Sirius Black's at the Department of Mysteries.
Yeah.
Have Umbridge do your dirty work for you.
And you don't even have to say,
thought.
like, I'm trying to protect Sirius Black. Like, instead, when Snape is in there, you could be like, I thought that Sirius Black might be at the Department of Mysteries, and I wanted to check it out because I wanted to be the hero that caught him. Because, you know what? Honestly, if Sirius is about to die, it's going to be easier to save him from the whole Ministry of Magic than Voldemort.
Yeah. It's actually, you know what? The more I think about it, I think I'm a fan of just bluntly telling Umbridge, hey, you might want to look at the Department of Mysteries for Sirius Black.
Yeah, well, and it's so funny because I feel like it's a coded message, but one that has so many, like, potential flaws.
Snape would pick up on this pretty well.
Well, yeah, but, like, if you're sitting there going, because, like, Harry says something of,
you obviously know Padfoot, but the place where it's hidden could be up to interpretation.
Yeah. Is it hidden Dumbledore? Is it the weapon? Is it...
Well, does Snape even know what they're referring to it by? Like...
Yeah.
He might not have been in on that. He wasn't in on that conversation at Grimmauld Place when they're all like, "You're looking for a weapon." Like,
there is a weapon.
Like,
Sirius is where the weapon is.
Yeah. That is a little bit up to interpretation, but still, as soon as he hears Padfoot is at the place,
yeah,
assuming not at Grimmauld Place.
So there is the mention that Harry says that he's thinking as loudly as he can, which I find ironic. So I guess my question is could you have a conversation without speaking?
I think it could. I think, we get that line of, they're locking eyes.
Yeah.
Like, and Harry's specifically looking right back at Snape and thinking, what we know of Legilimen's occlumency, based on their lessons, is there's a little bit of spell work involved, and there's a little bit of an invasion of sorts. So I guess the real question is, can you perform Legilimen's occlumency by just literally looking in someone's eyes? Or is there wand work that has to be done? Is there a spell that has to be performed specifically? Whether verbally or non?
Yeah.
But
if Snape is supposed to be gifted in it...
Correct.
You would think that there would be, like, I don't know. I would think that if I were Snape and this was happening, and our main trio's history, and what's currently going on with the Order of the Phoenix, that if you're coming into that room as Dumbledore's, I don't want to say right-hand man because that's a little too close, but we're just going to use that for lack of better terminology right now. You're Dumbledore's right-hand man. You're Dumbledore's only eyes at Hogwarts.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you think that you do some type of, let me see if I can get in there?
Do you think he'd have to sort through more Cho memories before he got to the... Or do you think this is such a vivid event that it's all Harry has in his head right now?
Well, I'd have to think it's like easier to find what's top of mind
Probably.
than like
Especially
digging.
something so traumatic.
Yeah.
You did hint at it a little bit before, but Umbridge decides to use a unique form of interrogation. She decides it's appropriate to use the Cruciatus Curse, which, for those that don't remember from Goblet of Fire,
Ouch.
it's an unforgivable curse.
Yes.
'Tis illegal. So,
Well, so here's my question. Does she even know the curse? Because from what we've learned of magic in all of the books is just because you know the incantation doesn't mean you can actually do it.
sure.
So
Like, take Expecto Patronum, for example. You might know the spell, but to actually do it
yeah.
requires a level of inner strength.
Yeah, and so it's not like they're teaching unforgivable curses.
Except at Hogwarts during the 4th year.
To be fair, who is actually teaching that class?
Yes, yes.
But
She strikes me as the person,
who would be like, I'd be able to do this.
not just boasting about it, but I feel like she'd be the type of person that practices it, like in her home.
Or like even if she didn't practice it, I could see her as the type of, because obviously you practice magic so that you don't have the dire consequences of just going for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I could also see Umbridge, especially where Harry is concerned, being like, you know what? If I say it and instead of torturing him, it snaps his neck, like, you know what? Problem still solved.
Probably. Well, she doesn't seem very concerned about... Okay,
Minister will understand.
here's my thing about Umbridge. If you're about to do this, I don't want to say I get it, but from her perspective, I could see where she would want to go to this next step. The issue I have is, why are you doing it in a crowded room of people? I would tell the Inquisitorial Squad,
Get all these people out.
Get out. Like, everybody out.
And but I would say...
Plausible deniability.
You would keep Harry, and you would probably keep, like, Ron and Hermione to almost, like, witness it as a threat, which...
I would, if I were going to do that, I'd be like, just to cover myself, I'd be like, it's just me and Harry.
But think about it, like, they've been doing a smear campaign against Harry, so, like, who's going to believe him anyway? Who's Harry going to go to? The Minister of Magic that's not going to listen?
Correct.
Any type of magical
exactly.
law enforcement who's not going to listen? Like, he has no one who's going to believe him other than people who, if they show up to his defense, are also going to get arrested.
Yeah, well, that's what happened at the beginning of this book, is you had one other person, and it wasn't the most reliable person, but it didn't matter, it was one person.
Yeah.
So if anybody is there, forget, like, 4 or 5 of just the Gryffindors, forget, like, if one of the Slytherins buckles, you know, which could happen, because they're after their own skin anyway.
Yeah.
So, I mean... Because then you could be like, okay, well, you were in the room where that happened, so we can charge you with being like an accessory to it because you were binding and gagging the other people in the room. So we're going to put you on blast.
Yeah.
You'll go to Azkaban. Oh, no, you know, she did the Cruciatus Curse, and I was like, whoa, no, that's not cool.
I'm also just like, don't get me wrong, I think I've talked about this before. I love a good villain. Like, I will take a good villain any day over, like, an amazing hero because I think there's so much complexity and there's so much of the, whoa, I didn't realize that they would actually go that far. And so one of the things that I love about Order of the Phoenix is actually Dolores Umbridge because she is such a terrible, terrible, terrible person and villain, but it's like it all comes out of nowhere with her. Like with Voldemort, you can see the plan. Like, you know what his endgame is and you understand why he's doing everything to get to his endgame. With Umbridge, it's just, hey, here's a pen that makes you bleed.
That's an interesting question that you bring up, is Umbridge a good villain? I kind of want to get to that point in the spoilers section.
Yeah.
Not because it's necessarily spoiler, but just because we're running long on the non-spoilers. And we still have a bombshell that she drops here of she ordered the Dementors after Harry in chapter 1.
Which again, villain.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's kind of a bombshell that she drops here. And Harry's even like, I'm sorry, like, forget Sirius for a second. That was you? Like, all that trauma you put me through early was you? What? And she was like, well, there's a lot of hemming and hawing about how we deal with this Harry Potter kid. And I was just like, I'll just do it.
Yeah.
I'll just take care of him. Okay.
Diabolical.
Psychopath.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. She's an amazing villain.
Like, wow. She's about to use the Cruciatus Curse, and then Hermione stops mid-curse and spills Dumbledore's secrets, the secrets of Dumbledore? Yes, that's it. She spills the secrets of Dumbledore out into the room and starts talking about his weapon. And you know what? It would be good if you actually brought the Inquisitorial Squad, because then students would know.
They could use it on you.
Students would know.
Also, give that girl an Oscar.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
man.
She did a great job selling it.
Yes.
And then who also helped her sell it was Draco. I love the little like throwaway line where he tried to hide it, but Umbridge caught the glimpse of greed in his face when it was like weapon that can like oust Umbridge and all of this, or just oust, you know, it's a Dumbledore weapon.
Yes.
Who knows what that could be? So she noticed the greed on Draco's face and was like, okay, it'll just be me, Harry, and you, and we'll go off to find this weapon. And that's how the chapter ends. I feel like, really quick, as we're wrapping up this non-spoiler, Hermione's the MVP of this chapter, yeah?
1,000%.
I mean, like, far and away.
Like, she not only in the beginning is the, okay, let's look at the logical scenario here and, like, go through the logical steps and think this through before we do something rash when we literally have all eyes on us. And then she's like, okay, this is how we relatively safely figure it out. And then she's the one that gets them all out of everything.
Yep.
Way to go, Hermione.
Way to go, Hermione. We will pause it right here. We will have a break, and then we'll be right back with the spoiler section. All right, so we are back with the spoiler section of Chapter 32. And I kind of actually wanted to start with a conversation that kind of got brought up at the end of the non-spoiler section of what makes a good villain. And you were talking about Umbridge, and I'm like, is she a great villain? And I know I've said in earlier chapters, she's honestly one of the big factors that makes me love this book so much, ironically, because I have actual anger and real emotion when I read her bits, because that's what she brings out of me, which is great. I think if literature invokes emotion in somebody, that's great literature. So to that point, yes, I do agree. But I think Snape is a better villain because of what you were trying to get to, of there's depth there.
Yeah, but I think
it's just not a one note. Umbridge is very one note.
She is, but
Snape is layered.
I think, to me, part of what makes Umbridge a good villain is since she has that, like, almost, like, one-note quality, it's like there doesn't seem to be a line that she won't cross. And to me, that's one of the things that ends up making a really great villain is when you have that, like, shock factor of you saw that coming from nowhere and you're like, wait, I'm sorry, you decided to do an unforgivable curse? Like, when you work for the Ministry?
Right.
And so, for me, like, with Snape, a lot of the stuff that puts him more in the villain realm is stuff that, like, you see why he does it. You can see the motivation. Whereas, like, for what does she even get out of this at the end of the day?
And I guess we're in spoiler section, so we could even go into the Voldy of it, because we obviously, in the next book, find out a lot more about Voldy's background and his history, and a little bit about what makes Voldy.
Yeah.
And even he has some depth to his evil.
Well, and I think with Voldemort, too, like,
I guess we need more depth on what in Umbridge's childhood made her the way that she is.
Well, and think about, like, with Voldemort, like, how many people has he killed over the course of the books. And no matter how many people he kills, like, especially once, like, he essentially orders Cedric's execution, we'll call it. Like, after that happens, like, you're kind of at the point where it's like, he could kill anyone, and the only reason that it's affecting you is because you have a connection to the character. Not from the shock value, not from the, I can't believe he would kill that person. But it's just, the only thing that Voldemort does is almost like the stereotypical bad guy of he is going to torture then kill. Mm-hmm. Whereas Umbridge, part of what makes her such a, like, almost diabolical villain is, like, there's almost, like, a sick sense of satisfaction from, like, the pain and the agony. She almost gets a joy out of torturing these children, whereas, like, Voldemort is, everything is a means to an end.
I think we briefly got on this topic in one of the previous chapters of, like, Voldemort does enjoy torturing people, and he does enjoy killing people, but his enjoyment comes from the power of it, like him exerting his power. I'm more powerful than you.
Yeah.
Umbridge seems to enjoy the pain that she's inflicting on someone.
Yes.
Like, that's what she enjoys.
Like, she enjoys the pain. She enjoys that she is the one that has, like, caused it and that she gets to wield this power. But
more
it's
sadistic.
Not, yes. It's not I still think with Voldemort, even with him enjoying the power of torturing and killing, like, it's still a means to an end. He's doing it because it's whether it's to get rid of all of the Muggleborns, or it's to get the information that he needs to stamp out Dumbledore, like, whatever it is, everything, you see the motivation, you see why it's happening, and none of it fully surprises you. Like, you get the shock value of Cedric's death, but then you're like, I mean, it's Voldemort. He was gonna go and
like
kill a baby. Yeah. It's fine. Whereas, like, Umbridge, you just keep reading all this stuff and you're like, I'm sorry, you decided that detention was going to involve a pen that's essentially a scalpel on your hand?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a new level of villain in a way. Yeah.
And, like, I love the villains that, like, I don't want to say have no boundaries, because typically, like, the boundaries you hear about is that, like, they won't, like, kill someone. And most villains, especially when you're talking about in, like, a fantastical world, seem to have, like, no issue with that. There's so much shock value and interest, and sitting there and going, like, think about her pulling Harry out of the fire, and then her deciding, okay, first I'm going to use a highly regulated substance to get the truth out of him. Oh, we don't have that? You know what? Even though I have 10 witnesses here, I'm going to do an illegal, unforgivable curse, and the minister will understand if he finds out. Oh yeah, by the way, when people were trying to figure out what to do with you because you were the problem, I'm the one that decided to essentially try to kill you, but not actually kill you.
I think you hit it on the head too with Voldemort does what he does, which is heinous and awful and unforgivable, but he always usually has a reason for doing it. Like, he does it with a purpose.
Yes.
Which doesn't make it better, but still. Umbridge seems to just do it because she likes it. I almost wonder why she wasn't put in as at least a teacher when Voldy takes over Hogwarts. Like, the Carrows are made the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, and then Snape is headmaster.
Yeah.
So, do you think, like...
Okay, but if Snape's headmaster, there's no way he's letting Umbridge anywhere near
Well,
it.
that's true. But do you think Snape and Voldy had that conversation of, like Voldy's like, you know, this Umbridge woman kind of gets what we're doing. What are your 2 cents on her? And Snape is like, that woman... No. I can't do it. I just can't do it.
Snape just says no.
Kill me now, because I'm not working for that woman again. I wonder what that conversation was like. Or is Voldy like, you know, I can't have that woman at my school.
Yeah, she'll be coming after me next.
Voldy actually cares about Hogwarts for all of his faults.
It's true.
He does care about that school. So he's like, nah, I can't
Or
have
Voldemort saw Umbridge and was like, I don't want her getting any ideas. She's gonna take over my Death Eaters.
I get Umbridge has a position at the Ministry in Voldy's Ministry of Magic,
yeah.
but it's not a terribly high position. It's not like he looked at her and was like, oh yeah, you run the Ministry. No, he had at least 2 people above her. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's not like Voldy looked at Umbridge and was like, she gets me.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? I don't know. Anyway, another villain that we can talk about here, Kreacher.
I'm not necessarily going to call Kreacher...
In this book, he's a villain.
Well, in this book, yes.
In this book, he's a straight-up villain.
In this book. But when you look at how house elves were treated, especially by purebloods, and how...
He loved his pureblood family, though.
That doesn't mean they were kind to them.
No, absolutely not.
And when you look at that, and when you look at how the Order treated Kreacher,
Sirius did not treat him well.
Yeah.
Your boy.
Yeah.
Your guy.
Yeah. We've talked about this irony before. We've talked about the irony that...
His one ironic line. You were on for his one ironic line.
Where he talks about it's how you treat your inferiors. And it ends up doing Sirius dirty in the end. Backfiring
immensely.
And I find it so interesting that Harry, because again, these books are from Harry's perspective, and I find it so interesting that Harry calls out that Kreacher has bandages on his hand, and like all of the red flags that we mentioned in the non-spoilers
There's
section.
Some interesting things that he noticed about Kreacher in this chapter that he dismisses.
Yeah, that like he calls it out. It's not like he's so into what his own endgame is that he doesn't notice Kreacher's red flags. Mm-hmm. So the fact that he actually calls them out and doesn't like make that connection. Listen, Kreacher technically has a large involvement in Sirius's disappearance. We're going to call it disappearance because we never got clarity. And I've harped on this before about what happens when you fall through curtain, veil, whatever you'd like to call it. Mm-hmm. So we're going to call it Sirius's disappearance because I'm still processing this grief from however many years ago this book was published. I'm still having issues. It's fine.
It might be 20
Oh, God, don't
years.
tell me that, Dan. I mean, Kreacher does obviously play a role in Sirius's ultimate demise because it's not like Kreacher's dumb. He knows what's going to happen. He knows what the plan is. And he uses it as his opportunity to get back at Sirius and takes, like, pleasure in it. But I don't want to necessarily say that Kreacher is a villain, knowing what happens later on.
I think Kreacher has an interesting arc, and I've said before, I think he has one of the more interesting character arcs.
Because villains don't have remorse. A good villain does not have remorse. So I'm not going to call Kreacher a villain.
Sirius did not treat him very well. I don't even know how much remorse he really, truly feels for Sirius. I think he realizes who he really loved was Regulus, and a lot of what he does in the end is really for Regulus's memory than anything else.
Yeah.
But whatever the case, he does make his character turn. And again, you could say the same thing about Snape. Villain. Whatever you think about why he ultimately ends up not being a villain in the end, still has that turn. So it layers. Obviously, we get less pages of Kreacher than we do Snape. But yeah, Kreacher's an interesting character.
Yeah, and I think it's... in this chapter particularly, Kreacher is actually, for the whole book up to this point, Kreacher is very much written off. It's another one that we've talked about a couple of times that J.K. Rowling does a great job of leaving breadcrumbs throughout the book of what's going to happen, what's going to be important that you don't think about. And when we had all of this talk of house elves in the past, like, now you're at the point that you're like, oh, okay, we decided to introduce another house elf that isn't treated very well. And then when Harry is trying to communicate with Sirius and creatures at the fire, like, it's not suspicious to anyone because you're like, well, of course he's gonna be at the house. Like, we know that pretty much the only people who are constantly at the house are Sirius and Creature.
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily see anything that's super suspicious, and you just think it's a, like, well, okay, somebody answered the fire.
In all seriousness, the events in this chapter and how they lead into the ending of this book, the guilt would be crippling.
Yeah. I mean, reading the book for the first time, you don't notice any of the, like, bright, glaring lights that are, like, screaming at you. You're just kind of like, all right, Harry's being Harry, like, whatevs. But then, like, rereading it when you know what happens in, like, a couple of chapters.
Yeah.
Not even that you have to remember it for book 7, but, like, in a, like...
In, like, 3 chapters.
In,
this
like,
all falls apart.
3 chapters, Sirius is just gone.
Yeah.
And it's even, as someone who, like, loves Sirius as a character and loves, like, what he gives to Harry and Harry's character, it just is gutting reading it and seeing how Harry's stupidity ultimately leads to Sirius's demise. I'm going to say demise. I have a lot of issues with...
I will...
We'll get there, but...
I will push back a little bit on Harry's stupidity because I think Harry's not wise decisions in this chapter...
Stupidity.
are also a credit to Voldy and how he orchestrated this whole thing. I mean, it's not like Harry just did this of his own accord. Voldy planted a seed and made it grow and made it grow and made it grow and then finally pulled the whole thing together. And it's a really well orchestrated plan from Voldy.
Yeah.
That a lot of people contributed to. They were kind of making it real for Harry to buy in. Like, the idea of the weapon, the idea of the Department of Mysteries is a real place and it's a real thing.
Yeah.
Snape, even in the occlumency lessons, are like, you shouldn't be going there. You shouldn't be seeing this. Well, he's right, and he's right for even saying that. He's also feeding Voldy's whole thing of, like, this is real.
Yeah.
This whole thing is real.
And, like, Voldemort, part of what is almost so, like, terrifying of him is how many steps ahead he is and how well he understands the nature of people. And that's what Voldemort ends up playing on a lot. To get his Death Eaters, he preys on their fear of, you know, helplessness or not being in charge or whatever it is. And Voldemort knows how people's minds tick. And I think that's what makes Dumbledore so terrifying to Voldemort is, like, you don't know what with Dumbledore. I mean, you could argue that Dumbledore is also a villain in this entire series. And I'm sure a lot of people would make that argument once you get to the end of Deathly Hallows. But Voldemort knows what makes people tick. And that's part of what makes him so, I don't know, good at being bad.
Yeah.
But it's just so heartbreaking to read this chapter and to see the whole point of this chapter was Harry is trying to save Sirius's life. And this whole chapter, you just see the, like, 12 different ways that if Harry had just slightly veered, he would have saved Sirius's life. Like, if he had actually just taken a second and listened to Hermione and they thought through it and he went, oh, right, this could be a setup. If he had thought about, is there anyone else in all of Hogwarts who could help you? Even if it wasn't thinking of Snape as a member of the Order, even if it's going, wait a minute, portraits. Let's go find a portrait and have someone communicate with somebody on the outside. Or if it's like, yeah, it could have taken longer, but if it's sending an owl Or if it's taking the 2 seconds to realize that, like, if they're torturing and trying to kill Sirius, like, make the connection that Voldemort would be doing that because it's the person that's most likely to get to Harry. So he's not going to kill him because then there's no leverage anymore.
You could almost make the argument that the whole Arthur Weasley incident is the best thing that ever happened to Voldy. Mm-hmm. Because, yes, it made him aware of the connection. Mm-hmm. It reinforced that, hey, you're seeing something that's real. Oh, well, now I can manipulate that.
Yeah.
Which is that's ultimately what it is, because now you've saved Arthur Weasley. You've done an amazing, heroic thing that everybody praises you for. Mm-hmm. I'm going to do the same thing with someone you care even more about.
And since it's with Arthur Weasley, and not many people in the Order take issue with Arthur. Does anyone take issue with Arthur in the Order? Like
Molly?
Yeah. Molly, that's it. And so, like, when you've saved everyone's favorite guy that you don't take issue with, all of a sudden, when you say you're seeing something else, everyone's going to believe you. And Hermione is the only one who's like, hold on, wait a second. Can you imagine the guilt that Hermione must feel?
Yeah, I'm a little...
Because she points it all out. Imagine what happens at the end when she goes, oh my God, I was right about this. If I had pushed him more, if I had stopped him from going...
I can forgive Harry for being a little absent-minded, given the emotional stress he's under. Also, the exhaustion that he's under, because he's going through these exams and all that. I can forgive him for that. The only thing that I can maybe fault Hermione for, and keep in mind, I did call her the MVP of this chapter, and I mean that.
Yeah.
The only thing I could possibly fault her for is not thinking of, hey, let's go talk to Snape. Mm-hmm. I think that's the thing she probably would normally actually say.
Yeah, I think part of it, which we touched on earlier, is that we've had so much of him being the scapegoat.
Oh yeah,
villain,
I'm not saying Harry would do it.
We can't trust. Well,
Harry
like, I'm
wouldn't
even
do it.
saying, like, I don't even know that Hermione in this situation would think to say, like, hey, Harry, one of your, like, arch nemesis, like, let's go talk to him and see if he'll save the one living person that he hates the most.
So I think the true what if comes in. He runs to McGonagall in the hospital wing. She's not there. What's his next step? What if his decision is not run to Ron and Hermione, but it's like, okay, who's next in the Order that I could maybe contact? And he then goes to Snape. Mm-hmm. Then that could be like a whole thing, because Snape has been... like, in his occlumency lessons, like, if something happens in the school, like, you actually see a remarkable, like, I don't want to say camaraderie, but it's like a interaction between them that's not a very animosity-filled interaction. It's more like, Harry, did you see anything happen in the Great Hall? Like, after, like, when the whole Trelawney thing happens, and they're screaming in the hallway, and he's like, Harry, did you hear anything when you're... All right, I'm out. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, let's do this. Like, I think if he went to Snape would be like, okay. Well, he'd be like, why did you see that?
Well, I think what would have happened is...
Either way.
It would depend on the scenario, because the reason that it seems like Snape's not helpful is because he's surrounded by a bunch of people that he can't tell that he's helping you. He can't say to Dolores Umbridge, hey, got your code, bro. Let me go, like...
Right.
Let me go call the troops. He can't do that when
Harry goes individually, though. When he goes and finds him in his office.
And that's what I'm saying. It's like, if Snape was alone in his office, I think something could have happened. I mean, there would have been some level of snark, but there would have been I still think there would have been some level of Snape.
There would have been snark first, and he would have pulled the Hermione argument of... Snape would have been Hermione initially. Yeah,
he would have been Hermione, but he wouldn't have told Harry, like, hey, I'll go check. He would have been like, don't worry about it, Potter. And then he would have gone and checked. So we still would have kind of ended up in the same scenario, maybe. I think.
I think Harry would have annoyed him enough to be like, fine, Potter, let's... Yeah. I will show you. Yeah. Like, this will be done. Just because he'd be annoyed at it.
Well, and I also think that, like, if you had that, even if, say, like, in a completely, like, delusional world, because I don't think this would have happened, but like if Snape was like, let's break into Umbridge's office and call Sirius. I also think you wouldn't have run into the issues with Creature because Snape, I think, would have seen that. Snape doesn't have the emotional connection to Sirius.
Correct.
He doesn't care about Sirius. He cares about the bigger picture.
Correct.
And so he's not going to sit there and be so ramped up about trying to save Sirius. He's trying to
figure out the problem.
Yes. And so I think he would have seen all of the issues with Creature, whether or not he would have like relayed that to the trio versus like you guys are children, calm down, let the grown-ups handle this, is another story. But like there are so many different spots through this whole chapter where everything that happened, like if Harry had made one slightly different decision, the entire series would be changed.
Yeah, I guess where I kind of fall on Harry and this is I'm actually more forgiving of Harry in this chapter, even though what the results from this chapter is more devastating. But I'm more forgiving based on the circumstances. At least he had a reason to go into Umbridge's office and try the Flute Network. Versus the last time he did this, which is like, why are you taking this risk? You do not need to take this risk at all on any level.
Yeah.
This at least is a risk worth taking.
I agree. Like, it's a risk worth taking, and given the facts that are immediately in front of him, it makes sense that it would end this way and that he would feel this way. But it's just, especially as a huge, serious, like, lover and advocate, this chapter, like,
hurts your soul.
After reading it for not the first time and you just see all of the different ways that Sirius's life could have been saved, it's almost like every single time you notice that Harry skips something that could have saved him, it's just like twisting the knife like over and over and over and over and over, because it's like, dude, right there, if you just chilled out for half a second to listen to what Hermione was saying and you guys walked through it, Sirius would have never been there. Yeah. If you had gone, oh, McGonagall's not here, okay, who's another like person that could actually check on this for me without it being suspicious?
Go to Molly. Could pop into the burrow.
Well, and it's like, okay, then
oh, I was just checking to see if I'm coming there for the summer.
Yeah, like...
That's a lie that he could have told.
Okay, I don't know how long it takes for an owl to send a message, but think about all the different ways that you can send messages through the magical world. Think of all of the different people that could have sent a message to, like, Lupin or Molly or Arthur that was
you
just...
send an owl to Molly being like, hey, is Padfoot at the house?
Mm-hmm. Or, like, you could, the same message that you gave to Sirius, you could have sent to, like, Lupin and has been like, is my dog in the doghouse?
Yeah, that would have worked.
Like, and he would have figured it out. There are so, and I get it that, like, the owls were probably being tracked, so you had a talking phone.
Oh, they were definitely being,
you don't know, like, how quickly anything could get out, but, like, we see all of these different ways of communication, of transportation. Yeah. And, like, you just, there's so many different ways that could have changed it. And if Sirius hadn't died, it changes Harry's outlook on things. It changes who Harry has in his corner. And honestly, Voldemort would have still been underground. Because the end of this book, like, there's no denying that he's back.
Right. This book changes a lot, obviously. And I know it must have been a process for her to write, because I know originally she wanted to kill off Arthur in that scene. And then when she decided no, but she still needed that big emotional punch in this book, it must have been a process to write.
And when you think about it, like, as far as, like, character motivation moving forward, like, I think Arthur gives a bigger shock value for a death than Sirius does, because when you think about, like, Sirius throughout the books, like, it still kills me deep in my soul that he passes his demise, whatever you want to call it, at the end of this book. But, like, you're not totally shocked. The only reason that you're actually shocked is because, like, Harry is finally getting that, like, familial connection, and then it's ripped away.
Yeah.
And it's one that, like, you know, in Prisoner of Azkaban, there's only short little glimpses of the relationship. In Goblet of Fire, like, you see Sirius a little bit more, but it's still, like, you have to write in code, you have to meet in secret, you have to, like, you know, under the darkness of night talk, and, like, it's finally getting to the, you might be able to be out in the open, you might be able to, like, actually, like, go and get a butterbeer with me, you might be able to, like, actually be my guardian again. And it's like everything seems to be on, like, the upswing in this relationship, and as soon as there's, like, that nice little glimmer of hope, it's just smashed out and we get no answers on it, and I am still waiting, J.K. Rowling.
I don't know if I was in Harry's position how I would be able to honestly function or exist with how this book ends.
Your whole life you've essentially
crushing.
had no family because, like I said earlier, like, the Dursleys, like, yeah, they're his family, but, like...
And then you being essentially the reason?
Well, and it's like, and then with the vagueness of what happens to Sirius, and it's like, you don't know. No one knows, and he's just gone, and we don't know if it's gone forever, if he's in some other realm, if whatever it is that actually ends up happening. And I can't imagine that makes it any easier, because it's not like you can be like, oh, well, and he's in a place of sunshine and rainbows, and that's why it was in the Department of Mysteries. There is nothing about this that can give Harry any level of peace.
It's a packed chapter that has so many epic consequences for the rest of the whole series. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's an interesting one to kind of break down. Do you have anything else for spoilers?
I think that might be it. Other than me laughing when Umbridge says, do you think I can't handle 2 wandless teenagers to Malfoy? And I was like, I mean, I don't know.
It's a load. That's a load to handle. I don't know. All right. Well, on that note, we will end it here with chapter 32, and we will be back next week. And thank you guys. Again, thank you to those wonderful comments at the beginning of the episode. We really appreciate all that. Check out our Spotify when you listen to the episode and leave a comment, leave a review, participate in our polls so we can find out all 77% of people that disagree with Julie. Also, check out our Twitter and Instagram where you can... or X. Whatever. I'm going to keep calling it Twitter.
Same.
Check out our Twitter and Instagram where you can leave kind of comments on the episode, and we will shout you out here on the podcast. So with that, we will leave it here, and we'll be back next week for chapter 33.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Hogwarts, a podcast. If you like what you've heard, please click the subscribe button on your preferred podcasting app and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Hogwarts a Pod.